All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Social Enterprises for Nonprofits. We are so glad to have Vanessa here with us. Not gonna waste any more of your time. Vanessa, I'm gonna hand it over to you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today. And I'll present some slides to give an overview of social enterprise and present a bit of my background on this topic as well. But I just want to say that if when we move into the discussion period, if anyone would prefer to stop the recording, maybe just let Anika or myself know via private message that we'd be happy to do that. So, yes, my name is Vanessa Paisani. I consult with the Pond Deshpande Center, which is at the University of New Brunswick. And it was started just over a decade ago with the mission or the mandate to help bring um, heart to the private sector and really operational excellence to the nonprofit sector. I really like to bridge the gap between those two sectors because we often think about the community sector having a lot of impact and the private sector generating a lot of like wealth or capital. And I think that, we're all here today because we believe a world where merging those two things are possible. And social enterprise is for us a pathway to do that. And so as it relates to environmental work, in 2010, so 2010, yes, 2010. So a number of years ago, I joined an environmental nonprofit called the Gaia Project, which is still running today. And our mission at the time was to educate or help New Brunswick youth learn about the link between the environment and energy. And so, they continue that, and the organization has grown and evolved over the last 13 years. It's amazing to think about it being around that long. And as it relates to social enterprise, many nonprofits or community organizations develop social enterprise as a way to both meet their mission. So for some organizations, they would be called it what we term an employment-based social enterprise. So they're looking to employ people who have barriers to traditional employment, and that's part of their mission and mandate. And some, through their community work, they've been able to commercialize something that they think has a broader audience, and so they're looking to find ways to do that, and then everything in between, which we'll go through a bit today. But I did want to just provide, I suppose, a bit of my background in both environmental work. And so I was at the Gaia Project for 5 years, and since then I've done a number of projects. I've done a lot of fundraising, both for all for impact organizations, on both sides of different like legal structures, so nonprofit, for profit, all these types of things. I haven't worked with a ton of cooperatives, but I understand the framework, and I understand that you can be a nonprofit or a for-profit cooperative as well that generates wealth for the community. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well today. So I'm going to share my screen and just get you to tell me if you can see it. Thumbs up, yes. And I don't know if you can see, I have a call coming in, but I think I declined that. Okay. Can you see there's like a
Yeah,
little
we
call
can
screen?
see it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
It's
that it's
my
gone
brother
now.
calling, actually. Okay, I was like, I don't know how to get rid of that, actually. I almost never get those kind of calls. So anyway, my apologies. So, um, this is a topic that we've been exploring, and you'll see here with the little logo, it's called Social Enterprise New Brunswick. So this is an initiative of the Pond Deshpande Center, which is at the University of New Brunswick. And our goal here is to build capacity within the social enterprise ecosystem in New Brunswick. And so at this time, we have a number of initiatives, capacity building for nonprofit organizations that have social enterprises. And then we're also bringing together, or we've brought together, I should say, over the last 2 years, the Social Enterprise Advisory Council with the goal of developing a strategy for having social enterprise be understood at the provincial level. And so with that, I think of social enterprise at the provincial level, but more to align the ecosystem to be able to have a two-way conversation, because at this time there's a lot of players. So our goal is to help all those players work. Let me just, there we go. So yes, that's yeah, Vanessa Paisani. I introduced myself already. And just to give you again an overview of the Pandeshwani Center at UNB, this recording stopped. I think, I don't know what happened there, but okay, I was like, I'll let you
There you go.
figure that
Sorry
out.
about that. The internet crashed briefly here.
No worries at all. Yeah, so we're doing that through two main pathways. One is we're building the next generation of social entrepreneurs, and we would consider all of you social entrepreneurs. This week I met a young man who's running McGraw Seafood on the Acadian Peninsula, and that's a social enterprise that's owned by his First Nation band, and so he's the manager. He manages that on a day-to-day basis, but it's a social enterprise because all of the wealth that they're generating is either going back into the business or into the community. We're also looking to expand our impact of social innovation. And so for us, that means working in social innovation labs on specific guiding questions. And the main one that we're working in right now is around early childhood education and asking ourselves, what does that system need to, I guess, like help both the people within the system as well as the people the working in the system as well as the people accessing the system, because it's very important to the future of society, and there's been a lot of additional pressures on that sector recently during the pandemic and as a result of pandemic recovery, of course. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So this is a spectrum of social enterprises in Canada, and the reference for it is here. I like to start with this just to give people, I guess, an understanding of that it's a spectrum and not like a specific definition. And one thing that I find is if you use the term social enterprise, people understand that differently. And so for me, it's been important to, in my conversations, ask people, okay, well, when you're saying social enterprise, like, just help me understand what that means for you. And so on the one end, we have, let's say charities operating a related business, all the way to businesses donating to charity. And I'm sure you could think of a lot of examples of both. Here we have enterprising nonprofit organizations, and just a simple basic example of that could be, let's say, sport associations where they charge fees for participation in their programs. So that would be really a social enterprise, but maybe they also provide stipends for people that have barriers to accessing their programs. So that would be an example of enterprising, but also obviously with impact. We can also have nonprofit corporations with that they have a defined social purpose. And, I think we could potentially argue that most nonprofits do have a social purpose, but they just spell it out here to say like that these are a spectrum. We also have cooperative corporations with social purpose, and these can be nonprofit or for-profit. We can have businesses with a social purpose, and so a friend of mine runs the Farmer's Truck, which started in Moncton and now sells mobile market vehicles into the US. And so his business is private, but it has a social purpose. And so we can also have socially responsible businesses. And for me, an example of this would be Patagonia. So they make apparel, but they did it in a socially responsible way by fully understanding their supply chains. And, as a result of understanding those supply chains and sourcing in a more ethical manner, they charge more for their products, but they also sell used apparel and things like that. And as you probably know, they exited the corporation to the community, so they could have send it to a initial public offering, like to the stock market, or they could have sold it to, someone else. But they made that specific decision to move it to still a private business, but it has, a defined social purpose. So, they might be somewhere in between here. And then we can have businesses that donate to charities like RBC, for instance, the bank. They donate to environmental initiatives, as you know. So that would be one example. And then, we could also have a strict commercial corporation that may not donate back. Although most, not most, but a lot of organizations, I find lately have some sort of way that they give back. So for us, we've been defining a social enterprise as a revenue generating project or corporation that's owned or operated specifically by a nonprofit. We have been talking with our Social Enterprise Advisory Council, looking to potentially broaden that definition to include any type of business that has a social purpose. Part of the reason for that is this social enterprise strategy that we're working on. And to put that into context, as you may know, this week, the Social Finance Fund of the federal government intermediaries were announced, which means that over the next year plus, there's going to be a lot of capital injected into our ecosystem to be able to do this. And that's going to be both for community-owned organizations as well as privately owned organizations. And so for me, I think it's a really exciting time to be talking about this, because I think there's a lot of activity happening both from a capital perspective, so like money in, but also I guess happening at the same time. There's an initiative called the Common Approach, and you can Google that, or I can put the link in the chat in our discussion, which is around how do we standardize the measurement of impact, because the standardization of measuring money has been around for a while. And, accountants being people that kind of like come in, or auditors who come in and check like your I guess your financial systems. And so the impact measurement space is also moving to standardization, which then legitimizes it and helps our ecosystem grow. And so I just say that to put all of this in context, I think the ecosystem for what we're doing continues to develop, and I'm excited to think that Canada is going to be one of the leaders in that. So traditionally, we think of sources of revenue for a nonprofit being government funding, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, membership. So, organizations might sell membership to the organization and provide services for that membership. They might offer special events. And, an example of that, like last fall, I ran in a run in Moncton, the Medavie 5K championship. And so, part of the revenue of that goes to support impact causes. We can look at sponsorships or partnerships. So maybe there's an initiative that gets sponsored by a private business. We can also have gifts and donations, which, and so I did put a picture of this book, which is really great, Shared Wisdom for Successfully Leading Organizations. And so this is really from an impact or community-based organization perspective. And one of the points that they make is most of the capital flowing into charities is from private donors. And so that's kind of, an important thing to remember and consider as to how this all fits in the big picture. And then social enterprises as a strategy for, and not just generating, let's say, unrestricted capital or money that you can use to innovate and try new things and all these types of things, but also social enterprises in the nonprofit sector, the community sector, are generally used to be mission aligned as well. Go. So at the high level, in terms of launching a social enterprise, generally, like any sort of business that sees a market opportunity, they would conduct a market assessment. So what's our opportunity? How big is that? How are we going to take advantage of that? Take advantage of it, maybe the wrong framing, but how are we going to meet the market opportunity that we've identified? How do we become properly capitalized? So how do we find the money that we are going to need to be able to meet this opportunity? That might be marketing, it might be hiring people, it might be developing a product, it might be buying infrastructure, all of these types of things. And I know we have someone here from ECW, and I think that they're an excellent job, or they're an excellent example of rural innovation in the sense that you've been able to purchase infrastructure in a rural community. You're going to use that to develop
Indoor
to
farm. It's an indoor.
Exactly, an indoor farm, and then sell that, but also work on food security, and so it has like this multi-level mission aligned type of initiative, right? So it's impressive, and I know that you folks are also doing transportation work and many other things that are social enterprises but are mission aligned, and I think that you've done a good job of having those be properly capitalized, which is not an easy task.
Yes, honestly, like before starting working at ECW, my point of view for a social enterprise was very different. And after I've started working there and I've understood how it is, and I'm still figuring out, but yeah, it has actually changed my point of view. And yes, ECW is actually doing a great job. Yeah.
What's been the major shift for you?
The major shift was that we are actually working for the community,
Right.
but
Yeah, I agree.
we are getting the funding, we are doing everything, but we are trying to make a profit too, but we are making profit in a way that community is being served. We are trying to we are trying to address the social issues, social problems, and trying to make profit out of it. And I guess, and this is also getting a lot of people employment. So it's like addressing all of the things that we are facing, all the problems that we are facing right now. So for me, it makes more sense to work for a social enterprise as an individual than to work for an MNC, because by this way you are also developing yourself, but then you are giving back to the society too. So it like fulfills you financially also, and like spiritually also. You are like, okay, I'm doing something for the society. So yeah, makes more sense.
Yeah. Yes, and I love the spiritual element, and I totally agree. Something that we don't talk about in the professional sphere enough. I agree. Yeah, and so on the profit side, for nonprofit, I generally use the word surplus just because I think sometimes it makes people more comfortable to think about, like, they're like, well, how could it be a community owned organization and we're generating profit? And so that's just like a tiny nuance, and to me, it doesn't matter what people do, but just something that I want to offer in to consider. So after the organization becomes properly capitalized, they then have to develop the operating rigor, or what we would call the operational excellence, to be able to sustain operations, but also to potentially get to the next level of, either like employing more people or providing more impact, whatever that is. Unless the organization has a solid base from which to grow on, it makes it very difficult to then actually like meet the demands of what you're doing. And so the last thing, and again, this is just an overview from this book that I have pictured here, but they also recommend review and renewal. And like any business, like any organization, really, we have to continuously ask ourselves, where are we going? Are we going in the direction we think we're going? And then how do we continue to get there? So one example that I use, because I think it's easy to understand, is Habitat for Humanity. As you may have been following, the 3 Habitat for Humanities in Moncton recently amalgamated into Habitat for Humanity New Brunswick, and they operate 3 different restores. And so a restore, you know, I can make a donation of home materials from my house, and they can sell it, and the proceeds of that go to support their mission. And so the new executive director, Perry Kendall, was telling me that some of their restores are actually the highest performing per capita in the country. And so, you know, I think in New Brunswick, we have these really great examples like Habitat for Humanity New Brunswick, like ECW, like probably some others on this call, who are doing amazing things. And then it's like, how do we tell these stories? Because I think sometimes we are so focused about like what we're not doing that we aren't celebrating or building on what we are doing. And you know, I'm lucky to work in this sector and see all of the many of the successes that we are already having. So we are also, and you know, it says applications open. So we have a rolling application for this program, which is called Vision and Validation. And so these are 2 offerings that we have to capacity building for social enterprise. We're calling it Social Enterprise Deep Dive. And we have 3 spots for our vision and validation work, which is for social enterprises that are at ideation, pre-revenue, or very early customers. So as you can see, traction and growth, these are people that are already in market, but we still have 3 spaces for organizations that are looking to like really fully launch and validate their idea for a social enterprise. And lastly, we are hosting an event in Fredericton on June 15th called Social Enterprise Excellence in New Brunswick. It's going to be at Planet Hatch, and I can put the link to register in the chat. And our goal with this is to continue to connect the social enterprise ecosystem in New Brunswick. So for us, this is part of the broader work that we're doing. We'll present a bit on the social enterprise strategy that we're working on. We'll also have the people that are in our social enterprise deep dive traction and growth program present to you the work that they've been doing. And we'll have a keynote from Perry Kendall, who is the newly appointed CEO of Habitat for Humanity New Brunswick. So our goal, you know, is to have presentations and discuss where social enterprise is currently, but also to provide a space for the social enterprise ecosystem in New Brunswick to meet each other and to continue to network. And this is our inaugural event, and we do plan to continue to offer this in the future moving forward. And so with that, I will perhaps stop the screen share so that I can see all of you, and I'm happy to answer questions or discuss or hear about the type of work that you folks are doing in your own social enterprises. I'd love to understand that in a bit more detail as well.
Yeah, we're a very small group, so feel free to unmute or raise your hand first if you'd like. But since we're such a small group, I think you can probably just unmute.
I have a question for you. Have encountered, so I just want to like take your intake on it, like how you feel about it. Sometimes when social enterprises are trying to trying to work on social issues and provide people with the things they need, it becomes a little difficult for them to make profit.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to encounter that? How are we supposed to overcome that? Or what is your take on that?
Yeah, you know, and it's a really good question because I did this body of work, I guess it was 2019, so pre-pandemic, and was an association of different organizations in New Brunswick that ran social enterprises, and they had structurally in the way that they were working some regulation changes that were going to affect the type of profit or surplus they were able to generate in the type of social enterprise they were running. And so some of that then came down to the organization asking itself, like, is this still, and this goes back to the review and renewal, is this still the right time to be doing what we're doing? Or do we, you know, do we let this go? Do we amalgamate? So again, like there's so many pathways. So like if I think about Habitat for Humanity New Brunswick, I mean, they amalgamated. There's others that invest in infrastructure. So I know a lot of organizations that would be doing various types of social enterprise work, and they would be investing in different infrastructure as a way to generate some additional revenue or surplus. So, you know, like there is a lot of ways where there's a lot of situations where I agree, like maybe you're not going to be generating a lot of surplus. So then the question becomes, like within what you're doing, maybe this is the core and this is very important to what you're doing and you're just breaking even. But if there's a risk of something changing, like inflation, let's say, and then all of a sudden that changes the amount that you're able to bring in, are there other places that you can sell or market what you're doing that's a new market, that it's like a slightly different thing that you're doing, but it's going to generate enough to then support this other activity that is core to what you're doing. And I would say that I think the private sector has the same challenges because, you know, there's a lot of things that could change here in the market, like inflation, as we've seen, that makes like the type of activity that they're doing no longer relevant. And then this forces innovation. And I think like, you know, while we would love to live in a world where we wouldn't, you know, necessarily have to change things all the time, you know, I think the benefit to having these kind of things come up is that it forces us to innovate and think of new ways to do what we're doing and to meet those needs in a different way, and then look at, you know, how could this potentially also meet our revenue needs, which might be different than the mission needs in some cases, but not always.
Thank you. It's actually, it makes more sense because the same thing I was facing, I was trying to put in a lot of things to our indoor farm to make a lot of profit and stuff. But then I realized that we have to work within the ecosystem. So we didn't want to outrun the farmers who are doing it. We didn't want to compete with them. So we wanted to create a ecosystem that's coexisting. So then it becomes a little challenging. But yes, having an additional income or putting in like small efforts to generate more income, side income for the main project makes more sense.
Yeah, and like in that case too, like I think that this developing social finance ecosystem like helps support that too, because it's, you know, and you know, like I just want to acknowledge like that the challenge you're facing is not significant, right? It's important. And I think it's a challenge that a lot of nonprofits face. And it's something that we've heard a lot is, you know, if I'm a social enterprise and I approach government for funding to innovate, they're just going to tell me that, well, you're competing with the private sector, so we can't give you money. But this whole developing social finance ecosystem is thinking about all of them in a different way. And so, you know, while it's still, I would say, at an ecosystem at its early days, I think it will start to help solve some of these issues, because I know it's not insignificant. It's you know, it's a challenge for sure.
I see there's a question in the chat from Kelsey who says, how can someone find out more about the incubator programs you mentioned?
Yeah, so if you, well, you can email me. Oh, just one sec. I was about to close all my windows. I'll put my email in the chat. And I will put the link also to our microsite, which is this Social Enterprise New Brunswick initiative that I mentioned, which is right here. But the easiest way is to email me, and then I'll also put the link to the Social Enterprise Excellence symposium in Fredericton. If anyone would like to come, we would love to have your participation. As I said, it's something that for us is the first time that we're running it, and we hope that that it provides value to people, enough value that is something that we can continue to offer again in the future. And so that's the link to register for that. What are some of the social enterprises, and I'm a bit more familiar with ECW, but some of the other social enterprises either that you've launched or are considering launching that are on the call? And feel free to share in the chat or or to come off of mute. Another social enterprise. So I drove back from Miramichi yesterday, actually, and there's the Trappist monastery, and they sell, as you may know, beer, and they're known across the world for producing beer as well. So that would be another interesting social enterprise. So I think there's like so many different types of examples of this, both in New Brunswick and across the world. And part of it for me is just helping people like frame what this is, because I think at least in North America, we're just so conditioned to think about things as how is this going to generate wealth? And in order to do that, that has to be a private corporation, when there are so many other pathways to do that, and and that they can all coexist, right? And that they might need some different supports. But if anyone would like to share what they're working on, I would love to hear it.
I'm sorry, I've already shared, but there's one more program that I would like to share about. ECW is working on a village car share program. I'm not sure if you guys are aware. So it's sort of a car rental only, but it's an electric car set up in St. Stephen's, St. Andrews, St. George, and Grand Manan that you can rent on hourly basis. And for me personally, I shifted from Fredericton to St. Stephen's, and I didn't have a vehicle on me. So it was of great help for me to reach to my office, to go get my groceries, because you don't have public transports in certain regions like St. George is not having any sort of public transport. So ECW sort of figured it out that what is required. They worked on it, and now they have a very good setup. People in St. Andrews use it, like they are very much willing to use it. Some of people in St. Stephen's, they are still like, we have a generation that's not accepting actually electrical vehicles. So Fridays, we have those farmer markets. We go there, try and promote. It's good. We are making people understand how it is, how it works, how it's helping everyone. So again, that's also a good initiative. We are not having much response in St. Stephen's. It was only me mostly using it. But yeah, that's again something that you try and make a profit, but again, you're serving the community.
Yeah, and transportation is a big priority, right? And especially in rural areas, and car sharing is something that's very common in larger cities like Montreal. And then so it's like, how do we figure out how to do that in a realistic way in a rural area? Because to your point, there's a need. And I think people have been working on rural transportation solutions for many years, trying different models. And I think yours is an example of an innovation. And does that mean that it's going to look the same way always? Of course not, right? But it's like that you folks are innovating in the sense that it's like, well, there's no guarantee that it's going to work out, like you said, exactly the way you think it is, but it's this process of like, let's try it out. We know we're meeting a community need. How do we get this into the community? And then learn about what's working and what's not working. And so you've already, like in your comments, mentioned about like some of the things that you've learned from this process. And I could imagine that you will continue to do that.
Sure, I will. Yeah. Thank you.
Marion, Kelsey, is there anything you would like to share?
Not really, but it was very interesting, Vanessa. Thank you for sharing your experience and all the knowledge you have on the social enterprise. I'm French speaker, so I'm
Tu veux
trying
dire
to.
Ah oui, on peut parler en français si tu veux. Mon français, j'ai besoin de pratique, mais je comprends.
D'accord. Non, c'était très intéressant. Moi, je travaille pour Valores, qui est un institut de recherche à but non lucratif. Donc, du coup, ça m'a interpellée. Je suis venue un peu par curiosité pour savoir si j'allais apprendre de nouvelles choses ou pas. Puis c'est le cas. Je ne savais pas qu'il y avait une institution comme celle dont vous avez parlé qui existe. Donc, c'est intéressant de savoir ça. Mais ça Valorez, c'est un peu un coq à cinq pattes, là, dans le sens où, oui, on fait des activités de recherche appliquées dans le domaine des ressources naturelles, puis des changements climatiques, mais aussi une partie de Valorez qui offre des services d'analyse, donc avec une partie de revenus qui pourrait être considérée comme profitable. Fait qu'on est comme un mix des deux, mais moi, en tant que directrice de recherche, je suis vraiment dans la partie non-for-profit. Donc, je suis tout le temps à la recherche de solutions de comment est-ce qu'on peut être autosuffisant financièrement, c'est comment éviter des déficits. Et puis, pas mal ça.
Yeah, et je vais répondre en anglais, mais you know, like another interesting link with what you're doing is like some of the research that you are doing potentially identifies opportunities for other social enterprises. And so, you know, you could do call out for projects and innovations and say like, hey, you know, through our research, we've identified this community need or this thing. And, you know, what are some ways that people could bring organizations forth to help solve these issues? And that's something that, you know, the federal government does quite well, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't understand French, so I would like to know what Anaika is doing exactly. Sorry, I don't understand.
Yes, I can try to say it in English. So I work for Valores. I am the research director here. And it is a non-for-profit organization doing applied research, but we also have laboratory and analysis services in chemistry and microbiology. So being the research director, I'm on the side for the non-profit part of the organization. And I came here today because I was curious to learn about what kind of tools I can learn just to help my team to be self-sufficient regarding all the trigger or all the challenges we can face. Because yes, we have scientific expertise and we are here, our mandate is to help the community and industry regarding natural resources and climate change adaptation, etc. But having some fund is not an easy, it's not an easy thing. So we have all the day to think about how can I manage my team to be sure I can keep the expertise, but not being in the trouble because I have a lot of resources, but not much to help. I don't know how to say it, but someone have to help me. We have here in this kind of organization, we have problem to recruit, and when we recruit, we have problem to retain the people. So when you don't have fun, but your trigger is how can I recruit and retain, you have a threshold where, okay, what can I do? If I leave my people going, probably I will have a lot of projects and no resources. But sometimes you have a lot of resources, no project to do. So it is a big challenge, and I don't know if someone has the magic answer for that.
Yeah, it is actually a problem for social enterprises. Like college graduates, most of us just go and to work with MNCs, big companies, and learn from them. But yeah, I think it's more of a feeling that people should feel connected to it, that we are serving the community. I think that way people can connect to it and work there. But yeah, this is an issue that we are facing. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Like, thank you for
Yeah.
so sorry, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have my good days and my bad days for English, so seems like it is a good day. I'm
Even
not
I'm
searching
very
my word.
I'll be honest, I'm very bad at English. I'm not that good. So I'm also learning.
I think you're both perfect. So, I mean, like, in Marion, like with that, it's, like, I don't know that they're, to your point, like a magic bullet, but it's like, what are the things, the little ideas that you're having and the other members of your team are having that you could try out, knowing that some of them will not work and some of them may work. And what I will say with ECW, for instance, like a lot of these projects took a number of years to really like get off the ground and continue to evolve and iterate. And and I think that is just like the way that sometimes unless it's like this super obvious market need, sometimes it takes some time and experimentation. And so it sounds like you have one line of business already, which is this consultations. And then, is it growing that? Is it something else? But who knows? Yeah. But you and your team would be in the best position to identify that. And maybe it's just hosting a brainstorming session together
Yeah.
to like surface some of those ideas.
Thank you, Vanessa.
We have about 7 minutes left scheduled on our time together. So if there's any last minute comments, il y a des commentaires de dernière minute, sentez-vous libre de les partager.
Awesome. Yes. Well, I would just close and then pass it over to you to just say, like, I put the links in the chat both for Social Enterprise New Brunswick and our Social Enterprise Excellence event. So the Social Enterprise Excellence event will be bilingual. And yeah, hope to see some of you there in person. And otherwise, please feel free to connect with me by email or through the microsite, and happy to discuss in more detail the work that you're either doing or thinking of doing.
So with that, a great big thank you to you, Vanessa. I will share the links with the people who registered and also the link to this recording later on. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for Vanessa for sharing all your knowledge. We truly appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.